So now I'm going to pass the microphone off to Elsie Souza, who we call the heart of the bookstore here at Bookstore One, and she's going to give the introductions.
Thanks, Bryn. So being a native from Massachusetts, everyone in the world knows Liz Walker. So for those of you who are not from Massachusetts, Massachusetts might be the state, but New England is the state, and Boston is the center of the world in New England. No matter what happens. And so WBZ was the flagship that everyone watched. It's what we knew in New England was WBZ. And even to this day, I stream WBZ in Boston, so I know what's going on back home, so to speak. But we knew Liz and Jack, and we knew Bruce, and we knew Bob Reeve, and knew Chet and Natalie. So that's the world we grew up in. And so, you know, sports and politics still dominate everything in New England, and our news channels were the source of information. So this wonderful woman comes to New England and becomes this great reporter. And I called my sisters back home in New England, and I said I was introducing her, and they were absolutely thrilled. So this is like a major event for us. So now I'll just introduce Francine Emmers. Francine Akbar was an Emmy Award-winning producer and executive producer at WBZ, the Boston CBS affiliate. Later, she was executive director of, is it J-Arts? J-Arts Collaborative, Boston's cultural center that presents arts, culture, and ideas from a Jewish perspective. For 25 years, Francine was a regular panelist on the nationally syndicated public radio quiz show, Says You. She currently serves on the Ringling College Scholarship Committee and is program chair of the Longboat Key Democratic Club, where she's presented such speakers as Heather Cox Richardson and Frank Boone. Liz Walker is a minister, a journalist, an activist, and sought-after speaker. She leads the Corey Johnson program for post-traumatic healing. As Boston's first Black evening television news anchor, she received 2 Emmys and an Edward R. Murrow Award for excellence in her field. A graduate of Harvard Divinity School, she served as pastor of Roxbury Presbyterian Church. She helped found the Jane Doe Safety Fund, has done humanitarian work in South Sudan, and has served on the board of Boston Medical Center and Andover Newton Theological Seminary. The mother of 3 and grandmother of 2, Liz now lives in Sarasota, Florida. So it's my honor to introduce Francine.
Good evening. Charlayne Hunter-Gault was supposed to moderate, and you would not mistake me for her. But she had knee surgery and wasn't quite ready to walk. But if you've ever had knee surgery, you know it's an ordeal. So she'll be up and around very soon, I am sure. Liz Walker and I worked together for many years in television in Boston at WBZ TV, which in what we regarded as its heyday was an NBC station and has since become a CBS station.
Yeah.
I was a program executive, and she was the weeknight news anchor, the first African-American to hold that position. For many years, Liz's news team was the #1 watched in the region, and she won many awards, including the coveted Emmy for her work. But in 2001, she did something that not many TV folks do. She left of her own accord. Not many do that. And she went to Harvard Divinity School and became an ordained minister, first as a Methodist and then in the Presbyterian tradition, where she pastored Roxbury Presbyterian Church for 10 years. And there is where she began her work in community trauma healing, which is the focus of her book, No One Left Alone: How Community Helps Us Heal. So let's talk.
Okay.
Your book, No One Left Alone, tells the story of the creation of the Can We Talk Network, a nationwide collective of spiritually inspired, community-based, clinically supported programs that address America's epidemic of post-traumatic stress and grief through the healing power of sharing personal stories. Why did you decide to write this book?
I wrote this book, and thank you, first of all, Francine, and thanks to all of you for being here. I wrote this book because I really wanted to tell the experience of a community. As a reporter, I always covered stories in the community of Roxbury. But as a reporter, Roxbury was a place where there was a lot of violence, there were fires, there were all kinds of problems. And that's how we saw Roxbury. That's how I saw Roxbury. To go back into the community as a pastor of a church was a whole nother level of getting to know people and realizing that people whom I thought were doing a lot of crazy stuff instead were people in a lot of pain. 99% of Roxbury is great, hardworking people trying to make it. 1%, but maybe less than that, could be problematic. But we often, well, you know this better than I, the media often paints that picture that you hear, that this is all messed up. And so it was going back in that I met courageous people who were going through incredible experiences, and I wanted to tell their story. And starting this program and meeting this family was all a part of that. I can go into that, but I don't know if what's the next question? I want to do this right. I can preach a sermon and I can go into this story, but let you take it.
Remember when you were a reporter and you tried to get your question in?
Back in the day.
Here I am.
Yeah.
What was your biggest surprise when you were preaching and ministering in this neighborhood?
I think that was my biggest surprise, that these are real people. And I hate to even admit that, but that's the truth. I mean, I think we all paint pictures of each other. We see each other through our own prejudices and through our own limited lenses. And that's what I saw, that these were people who had, broken down families and people who just weren't doing things right. And I don't want to make it that it was that extreme, but I probably define the neighborhood that way more than any other way. And going back into the neighborhood, the surprise was, no, these are people just like you, but these are people who are up against a lot of stuff that you might not be up against. And so seeing it from that perspective kind of changed my life. People who Roxbury is a very interesting neighborhood. It's going through gentrification now, but it's a neighborhood of people from all over the world, pulled together by poverty, people who are struggling and have run up against all kinds of systemic problems and run up into interpersonal problems. So the year that I moved there to take over the church was in 2011, and the neighborhood was going through just a spate of violence. I don't want to say gang violence. I'm not even sure that's what it was, but we had a lot of problems with gun violence. And the church is on Warren Street, which is kind of like right in the center of the neighborhood, very transient. I used to call that the Jericho Road, because you never know who would be walking down Warren Street. But there had been shootings, daylight shootings in front of the church, and just extreme kinds of things were happening with these young men and people who were angry for whatever reason. But the whole community was held hostage by what was going on, including the church. I remember one incident we had when we were taking children, because the church has always been a social justice-based church. And so we were taking a bunch of kids to the circus one afternoon. The mayor, Tom Menino, was giving out tickets to all the kids in the city, and we were going to take a group of kids to the circus. And before the kids got to the church to meet the bus, there was a shooting. And so there's now yellow tape around the church. And you look at that and you're preaching and say, something is wrong here if you can't get in this church because there was a shooting in the front of the church. And we had to round up the kids a different way. So it was that kind of thing that we saw, but we realized that kind of event had an impact on everybody in the neighborhood. Even though it was one event, on one street, everybody was impacted by it. And that was what I call trauma.
Were people afraid to come out?
What happened in my neighborhood, and I'm going to only speak for this neighborhood, people actually could come out and would normalize it. People would walk past it as if nothing had happened.
We had a shooting today?
This is just another shooting.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. But that's how you have to survive. If you have to get to work or you have to get to the store, you have to keep moving. And so that was the kind of life that people lived. I was, nearly comatose because I had never lived in an area like that, and I'd never been involved in that. So, I was responding, but people around me were saying, no, that's just the way it is, and we have to live. What we found out later, as we delved into the subject, and we wanted to do something as a church, we found out, no, these people they're just faking that. They're acting like they're making it, but they're being impacted. And I can make a comparison to where we are right now. We're acting like we're all right, but I assure you, you're impacted every day deep in your soul to what's going on. That's just human. And so it was that kind of thing. See, I'm jumping into a sermon right there. You have to watch me really closely.
So how did the Can We Talk program come to be?
So one of the families in our church, the Fitzpatrick family, a very large family from Trinidad, Tobago, had lost their son, Corey. Now, as I said, when I moved into that neighborhood to take over the church, there had been a rash of shootings, a bunch of shootings. Corey had died the year before. And his parents and his cousins and his sisters and his brothers and his grandparents were all still grieving his death when I got to the church. They asked me to come and do a memorial service for Corey when I first got there. And so this was supposed to be a celebration of his life. But when you've been murdered, and this is a year later, and now we're trying to paint a really beautiful picture of a life that we don't know who killed him, we don't know. It's very hard to celebrate when you're hurting. And I noticed that with this family. And so upon more conversation with the family, I realized, that they were grieving. I talked to some other people. I keep saying it really wasn't an I thing. There were other people in the church, and we wanted to do something to help this family a year after the death of their son. As that conversation went on, and it took a while to develop this program, we realized that the neighborhood was full of families like this. The church was full of families. If you go to my church in Roxbury and we have 60 people in a room, and you say everybody who's lost somebody or knows somebody who's lost a violent death, I guarantee you half the hands, no, 3/4 of the hands will go up, because that's how prevalent that was. And so that's when we decided to try to do something to help people. First of all, Social Justice Church, we go on all the marches. We meet with the police. We do all the things you're supposed to do in this country to fight violence. We're in the gun control movement. But there was something else missing. When people are walking around normalizing violence, and almost looking like The Walking Dead. That's how the neighborhood felt to me. Actually, that's how the world feels to me now. And what can you do? And so we talked to some experts in trauma. We talked to people at Boston Medical Center, and they said people are grieving. And maybe the church, of all places, can do something. So we started this program. People tend to think that churches only want to preach, condemn, take up offering, and have a building fund. That pretty much sums up a church. But we decided that maybe we could create a space where people who are grieving could come, anybody. And so we built this kind of thing called Can We Talk? We did it once a month, and it was kind of a hybrid between AA and old-fashioned church testimony, where you just come in anonymously and talk about your pain. We thought it was specifically for violence. That's where we started. But people started coming in, talking about all kinds of things. And we realized that we would have to do it more, so we made it weekly. Then other churches in the community asked us, well, what are you doing? We've heard about that. So it was really word of mouth. We just had a sign on our church: if you are going through pain and grief, come in and talk. This is anonymous. We don't record it. There's no referrals, and people just flock to it.
What was the format?
The format is a group like this. We explain some guidelines, tell your story. We tell you what this is about, just to give a little background maybe. And then we sit down. We might have music. We might have drums, just to kind of set the mood of kind of a safe and sacred space, but not a church meeting. So
Were there psychological professionals?
that was the thing that made this very different. We decided to blend the spiritual along with the clinical. What usually happens in a Black church is, or just let me say a conservative church, it's just the spiritual. You pray it away. You lay on hands. You do lots of rituals around death and pain and suffering, but you don't rely on any kind of clinical help. As a matter of fact, a lot of preachers don't believe that you should go to a psychologist in conservative churches, in some fundamentalist churches. So we wanted to blend those two.
So what was the role of psychologists?
Just to be there in case people were having a hard time. Now, remember, we're saying this is self-selective. So I'm saying, Francine, if you're having a hard time today and you just have nobody to talk to, come to my church. You'll love this. You come and you tell your story in a short form. You don't have to get up there and tell your whole story. You just tell a little bit about what's going on in your life. But what you are is you're surrounded by love. Because the people in the room, you become the most important people because you're listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart, and you're receiving whatever's happening in this space. Very simple. This is not rocket science. But what happened, I think, was that people just responded to the idea, because where do you go when you grieve? You can talk about it for a while to your family and friends, but after a while, people say, you better move on. And grief is not like that. And God knows trauma is not like that. So we're saying you can come here once a month now in Boston, once a week, anytime.
So this is a community who are not white upper middle class people with psychiatrists, I'm guessing.
Right.
Generally speaking.
Right.
And so did the fact that it was, in essence, in a church place, sponsored by a church, make it comfortable?
I think that it did. In some cases, people don't want to go to a church in our community. But in our community, everybody has a grandmother or a cousin or knows somebody who's connected to the church. So the institution of the church has a solid history. Mm-hmm. The Black church has an incredible history. Charlayne Hunter-Gault's father was a pastor. We talk about that all the time. And a lot of people who have risen to the level of a Charlayne can speak of the church because they came up that way. And so that is the power of a church. Even if you don't go, you know that church generally is a powerful and safe place.
Bedrock of the culture.
It's a bedrock of the. But the irony of this is there are churches that don't want to talk about mental health, that don't want to talk about these issues. So you've got those two got that tension that you're trying to work out. But people responded to the fact that we were having this in the church and we weren't trying to proselytize. We weren't saying we're going to change you. We weren't saying
Save you.
we're going to save you. We're not going to fix you. And we're wounded too. And you don't hear that in the church very often. So that was, I think, the appeal in this neighborhood.
There's a chapter about silence. What role does silence play in oppressed spaces?
Again, I just look at your news. Silence is when people who are hurting don't speak up. Silence is when people who are affected by something horrible and evil don't speak up. I'm not calling any names, but we're living in a world where people are not speaking up. People who should speak up are not speaking up. Now, we're speaking up, but other people, we're not the only ones hurting here, should be speaking up. So in a neighborhood like the one that I was preaching at in Boston, in Roxbury, there was fear, there was the stigma, there was the attitude that what goes on in this house stays in this house. And you will not take our family business out into the world.
Because it's shameful.
There's shame, but I would argue that this is not just a poor Black issue. That's my point.
No.
And I'm not saying that, that you're saying that, but I'm saying that that's what's wrong right now, that nobody's speaking up when we should. In the neighborhood, everybody's under this oppressive situation for lots of different reasons, but nobody wanted to talk. And then, you come to church and we can preach a wonderful sermon, but we're not talking about it either. And people are hurting. So our theory was, you got to talk about it. You've got to release some of this pain. And that's how you heal, by releasing some of the pain.
This book includes the story of your discovery of your own trauma that you experienced growing up during desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I grew up in the 50s during the civil rights movement. Well, actually before that, when Little Rock School was desegregated in 1957, I was in the first grade and the troops rolled in down Chester Street in front of our house. So you were kind of thrust into that, whether you were in it or not, just because you lived in this city. And I ended up desegregating junior high schools when I was 12. And it was awful.
Is this because your father thought that was the better school?
I guess. They didn't ask me. That was back in the day. I don't know what parents do these days, but back in the day, you are going to this school, right? That was it. So I don't even know what the process was. And looking back, I guess my father thought it was a better way for us to go. And, we were the smart kids, so we went. I went. My brother, who's 3 years older, did not go. But that was the summer in 1963 that the whole world kind of exploded and there were so many things happening. And my father died. And that was he died right before school started. And then I had to go to this school because my mother, who was my stepmother, said, you have to go because your father wanted you to go. But I think looking back on it, and I'm now getting some counseling on it, it was absolutely the worst thing to happen to me because my father had gone. I was mad about that. And then I had to go to this hostile place, and it was hostile back in those days. And so I think the trauma of that has never left me, and I have never forgiven Little Rock, and I've got to work on that because now all my friends who stayed in Little Rock, most of my friends who stayed, they love, this is home, and now we have, interracial meetings, and I'm like, no way am I going to do that because I left and I don't have those. They worked at things that I did not work at, so I have a lot of issues about that. Now, was it trauma? But it stayed with me, and I think the death of my father really complicated the situation. I think that's what I would call the trauma.
And we have to say your father was a minister.
And my father was a preacher.
And so it's not maybe entirely coincidental that
That
you
I'm a
find
preacher?
yourself
No, I
in
was.
this role.
I ran so hard from being a minister, you have no idea. This is not my. This is why I know there's a God, because this was not my idea. I know that.
There was a magnetic pull.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about how you ended up at Harvard Divinity School?
Well, I would I was in television news.
Not, Liz was a figure of glamour in Boston.
Glamour?
And you get
Okay.
just both on the anchor desk, but every black tie do that was a fundraiser. There she
That's
was
true.
in a fabulous gown,
Yeah.
smiling,
So,
and saying, "Do I have another bid?"
see,
She
Francine,
was-
I was also a reporter, and I
Oh,
reported
yes.
the news.
Yes.
But that was
But
that.
I was all about the glamour.
No, there was a glamorous life. That was back in the day. It was really exciting. And people thought that I had gotten fired because who would leave a job that was 6 figures? And my old boss, can I call you old, George?
You can say long ago, boss.
Long ago, boss.
Mine too.
George Miles, who's here, and I know a few of you know him, is an amazing man. And George was one of those who put me in the position that I was in. But it was a very prestigious position, and certainly you had status in the community and all of that. But this again, now this is going to sound like I'm preaching, but this is why I know there's something else going on in the universe. I was compelled to want to do this other work. In 2001, I went with a group of ministers from Boston on an expedition to South Sudan to investigate slavery. And I went to do a video of them. But I had never been in a war zone. I had never.
Let me just say that the news department wouldn't give her a camera. So she took her own and shot it herself.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, but it wasn't quite as heroic as you sound. But it was, I shot my own video. But the point was to tell a story about these Bostonians who were investigating allegations of slavery. I had never been in a situation where I had seen such pain. I'd never seen villages bombed. I had never seen anything like that. The war was supposedly over when we got there, but it wasn't over. And South Sudan is in a mess right now, so it's still ongoing. But the people I went with defined what was happening to me over there as a call from God, and that I was being called to minister, to be a preacher. And I had never, the pastors were Ray and Gloria White Hammond. If you know Boston, you know them. And Ray and Gloria, at the time, I had discovered them on television. 2020 or ABC, somebody had done, National News had done a piece on them. And they were like the Cosbys before Bill went dark, right? So this was back in the day when the Cosbys were really, this was a couple, they were like these two exciting.
She was a pediatrician.
They were both doctors. He had graduated from Harvard at 17 or some bizarre, brilliant people who went into ministry. Who does that? I met them. They described what was happening to me as being called. And Sudan was a whole nother world. I mean, who knew that this was going on? And they believed that we could do something. So I think that defined my change. I came back and decided to get out of TV news. And my brother, God bless him, he just died this year. He said, "You are out of your mind. You need to go to a psychiatrist, because nobody's going to leave a 6-figure job to go into Africa. That just makes no sense. No money, no sense." But it seemed to make sense to me. And so we went to Harvard, and I got a degree in divinity degree in seminary, and became a pastor, or became a minister, not a pastor, and worked with them there. And then from there ended up in Roxbury. So it's been a journey.
You were cold.
I guess.
You were cold.
I guess. Oh, wait, let me tell you this.
And she wasn't just called to the gown department.
No. So the first day, I got to write another book. God, I hope I can write another book. This one almost killed me, so I'm not sure I can do this. But if I can write another book, sort of memoir, my first day at Harvard Divinity School was September 11th, 2001. Honest to God. Now, what that means, I have no idea, but I left the newsroom and the 2 towers had not fallen. And Dan Rather was saying, these towers won't fall, whatever's happened there. And then by the time I walked across the bridge, because the TV station was in Brighton, and I walked across the bridge at Cambridge, the towers had fallen and the whole world changed. But my world had changed too. Do you know what I mean? And I haven't quite figured out what that means, but that's how that happened. So there was just all those kinds of things happening to me during that period.
So come around. your program's been running for how many years?
It started in 2014, so it's running 11 years now.
Wow. What difference do you think it has made in the mental health of the community?
I think, well, first of all, we have 19 sites around the country right now. And this is all word of mouth that we have. We just started a site in Harlem at Brindle Presbyterian. And we're starting a site this weekend in Washington, D.C. So one thing that has changed, other people are doing this. This is a good idea. It works. It's not expensive. It's just about opening up the church and having a different kind of ministry.
And it's not a one-off.
And it can't be a one-off. The other thing that's changed in our neighborhood is that people refer people to come to our church. So I can't say the neighborhood's changed and all is well, but people know we're there. We work with both Boston Medical Center and Mass General as a kind of a referral center. They send people to us. We send people to them. We kind of supplement the work that they're doing, especially Boston Health. I'm sorry.
Medical Center.
Medical Center. Boston Medical Center, because they're right in the neighborhood.
Which is a very urban hospital.
Well, it's a top trauma center, I believe, in all of Boston, right? Or New England. Right,
Yeah.
right. Old Boston City, absolutely. So we work with them. We are now, and they've just done an evaluation on what we're doing. So we've become a credible part of the community. And all we're saying is that this empowers the community to heal itself, to work on its own issues, that we don't always have to go to the emergency room. We don't always have to go get psychologists or psychiatrists. Some things, not everything, but some things we can work on ourselves. The family at the core of this, Corey Johnson's family, they're the leaders now in the program. His sister Danielle has started a group for young people just to talk. Again, not trying to imply that this is rocket science. We don't fix people, but people respond really, really strongly to what we're doing. And other communities are doing the same thing.
How did this experience change you?
I think that we all need healing. And when we talk about healing, that's that internal stuff. I don't think everybody's traumatized. Well, now I do. I kind of do. But I kind of think we're all on the edge here. And I think it's all right to say that this is, I was reading something, it changes you on the inside, an authoritarian kind of life. It puts fear into you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're Social Security. You don't know if you're going to be picked up on the street in the daylight, waiting on a bus. You just don't know. So I think it's changed me in seeing that, but also seeing ways to heal.
How did I was around when Liz was first drafting the concept for this book, which is 3 or so years ago?
4 years ago.
And then locking herself up to write it. Enormous discipline, I must say. I'm in awe of your discipline.
Yeah.
How did writing the book change you?
Writing the book was the hardest thing I've ever done because I was trying to tell a big story. And I thought maybe I'm telling too many stories and so that was very difficult for me. But writing was a healing experience for me because I would never have thought about my own mental issues as much. My brother, and I know he would be all right with me saying this, suffered from alcoholism. Well, my brother never got to deal with his pain that he had, losing my father. He told me about a month or two before he died that the day my dad died, they had a disagreement. And Charles was, I think, about 13 or 14, maybe a little older. And my father had told him to do something and Charles didn't do it. And Charles talked back to my father, which you didn't do in our house. You didn't talk and you certainly didn't talk back. And so my father left out of the house really upset. And then the next news was that my father had a stroke. And so my brother had never told anybody, this was 60 years ago, about feeling that he was responsible for my father's. Can you imagine? I felt so bad for him. And it just explained so much to me. So I guess the short answer is I think there's something healing about writing about your own life for any of us, journaling or just getting it out. Don't you think so?
If I could just finish writing that book that I've been working on for 20 years, I might feel that way.
Same thing.
But Liz's book has got like 10 pages of footnotes of seriously researched academic
I went to
things.
seminary. I went to school.
Yeah,
You have to have, you know.
I mean, this is not just a talk show book. This is a serious work. I have to say. So, what's the main message you want to convey from No One Left Alone?
That we all have secret pain, and that we learn to heal by healing together. I don't think Judith Herman, who is one of the biggest voices in trauma healing, she's a psychologist and a clinical psychologist, and I think she's in her 90s and still writing, is what I've heard. But Judith Herman said that there is no way to heal from trauma alone. Trauma is a relational dysfunction, so healing has to come relationally. So that's what my message is. And you may not have trauma, you may not have grief, but the least you can do is listen to your brother or your sister or your neighbor when they're hurting. And don't tell anybody to get over it. Ever. Ever. Please don't. So those are the lessons.
Thank you, Liz. I can tell you.
Are we through?
We're
We're
not
so
through.
fast.
Folks are going to ask you questions now.
So now we'll turn it over to the audience. Do you have questions for Liz?
I don't need the mic probably.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I want to just truly say that I've witnessed Can We Talk? And I was trying to find the text that I sent you the other day. It is literally a catalyst, a breakthrough area for trauma healing of all kinds. I went to my first one last week, and we bought a lady who had been confined in her house for 30 days, just never went outside. She has 5 little children. It was a whole thing. And she went there and she spoke. And the beautiful thing about Can We Talk? No one's allowed to give advice, right? You get to just get up and tell your story, feel what you're feeling, and sit down. That was monumental because we all want a solution. We all want to tell you what worked for us, and that's not allowed there. And just hearing everybody else, being able to get up and tell her story. She literally told me before she left, she is now released. And she went home to her 5 children, a completely different person. And I went home with her, so I was able to see them looking like, who are you, Mom? So I just really want to say I honor you, and I honor the work that you're doing. And it is insanely making an impact in our community for all kinds of trauma and all kinds of healing. And when you see it real life, you can understand it.
And
So
everybody's welcome. Thank you. And that's Bethel CME Church,
yes.
the first Saturday of every month at noon. And this church was very open to it. And we've been doing it here now for about a year. And it's just beginning to kind of take off.
Any more questions? Nothing?
You got questions.
No.
I go back 40-some years with Liz on TV. I watched Jacket Liz every weekday night. And then I'd watch the first 20 minutes of the Johnny Carson show. And then go to bed. But anyway, a question. I always felt watching you and Jack that you love what you're doing, but what you would have loved better is being out in the field doing reporting.
That's why when Francine said, he said that he watched us on, did everybody hear that? I don't know if that was, did we hear that? We're doing a live stream, right? And so we're hoping that you heard.
They were great anchors.
Yeah, that we were anchors, but you felt like we wanted to be reporters. I loved reporting. I absolutely loved it. Though when we first got to Boston, now my memories begin to click in, you know, you talk long enough. Oh, I remember I couldn't go to Charlestown. I got to Boston in 1980. Boston was still reeling from busing. And they had all these rules on where we could go as reporters. It was crazy. It was really
Where
scary.
you could go as a black reporter.
As a black reporter, absolutely. As a black reporter. We would go, we couldn't go to Charlestown, couldn't go to South Beach. If things happened there, you couldn't
go to
go.
North End.
And then one night I went to Roxbury and they were so mad at the press that they didn't want me there. So I was like, well, geez, I couldn't go anywhere.
Sit in your chair.
Yeah, Boston was rough, but I loved the streets of Boston. Boston's a
And it
tough
evolved.
city. Oh yeah, no, it's a good city. It's a tough city though. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So you talked about my takeaway from what you're saying is that sometimes silence is kind of the opposite of what Kimberly talked about. And the question that keeps rising in my mind is, do these sessions end up in action, or is the action the healing?
The action is the healing. And I there's an excerpt that someone quoted out of the book that said, we don't go to protests. We don't leave the meeting with an action to do that. But the idea of people who have never been heard, being heard is an action. And once you begin to tell your story, the good and the bad and the good, then you're taking action because you can claim your story. You claim your history. And it doesn't always have to be bad. We're in a point right now where they're stealing history and trying to change history. So you have to own your story. And so, when you talk about, well, it's my painful story, but that leads to the joyful stories. So it's all important. So I think it is a social justice movement. Mental health is a social justice action. Absolutely. Because everybody's not getting enough care. Vicki, I see Vicki.
Can I mention that you're having a Can We Talk at the Reed House tomorrow?
Yeah, Vicki Odom, who's from the historic Reed House in Sarasota.
People who did a trolley tour this afternoon in here today. Where are my trolley? We're having a Can We Talk at the Reed House at 5, and you'll be there.
Yeah, and Dr. Janet Taylor will be there. And we're going to be talking about social justice and about self-care.
The question that I have, and this is something that's been on my mind, and I've been talking to my mentors about this. Churches that are not talking about the trauma that we're going through right now, those are the ones that I'm not interested in hearing from or going to. It's those who are out and out talking about it, the trauma that I am experiencing with this that's going on in this country. I want to know, are people losing members over not talking about what's going on? Do you know?
I would think that churches would be losing membership. I think there are statistics that Pew Research has said that membership across the board is dropping. But is that true, Doctor?
Yeah, decreasing.
Decreasing. So, I think that churches right now are going through an identity crisis. Religion is going through an identity crisis. It should be a crisis. I hope it's a crisis.
Yeah.
Because who are we? What God do we believe in? That kind of thing. So those who have their head in the sand are absolutely losing, I think.
Does everybody know that Vicki runs terrific historical trolley tours on the Black history of Sarasota?
Yeah.
And
Wonderful. We do, and we have a historic house, the Leonard Reed House on Orange Avenue and Dr. King Way, and we're telling Black history stories in that house. So please come to Can We Talk tomorrow night.
And Vicki is doing a lot of amazing things at the historic Reed House. So I'm glad you're here. She's my sister in the journey.
I
Anybody?
think someone else has.
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't understand that.
I met you at Mother's Day Walk in Boston several years ago.
Right,
You were
right.
it was awesome to see you there. My question is, I think it's twofold. The first question, did that Mother's Day Walk have anything to do with
Absolutely.
those? I live in Beverly, and I go every year to that Mother's Day Walk. And I often wonder, I say, Jesus, what the hell why am I going here? Am I making a difference? What does it mean? So year after year when I go and I see the families, you know how the families get together?
Right.
And they have the pictures on the back of the people they've lost. And a few years ago, they had those stations. Do you remember? They had the Gina McKenzie. Remember the Jesus of the People? That huge thing.
What's it about the Mother's Day walk? If people don't know
Always,
about it. Okay.
it continues to impress me that we, even if we're not with the people who are hurting all the time, other people from around the community come. And as you walk through the neighborhood, there was the BP's for Jorge. Do you remember what happened to
I don't
him?
remember that
You
specifically.
talked earlier about how people say, "Oh, they say those people, it's their life." This kid, Jorge, lived in Dorchester. It was a Thursday evening. His whole family, they lived in a two-family house, as I recall. And the aunts and the uncles, they were all having dinner. And this was a good kid. And his mother sent him out to walk the dog before supper.
Mm,
And he was murdered.
yeah.
Nobody deserves to be murdered, but it made such a good story. I shouldn't say, I don't know how to say it, but supporting that group and that whole
Right.
movement, every year it doesn't seem to get better.
That's the question of the hour. Why isn't it getting better? Why isn't it changing? The Mother's Day walk in Boston is the creation of Tina Cherry, Clementina Cherry, who is a good friend of mine who lost her son, Louis D. Brown, many years ago. Good kid, wrong place, wrong time situation. And so she has all the mothers who have lost their children doing this Mother's Day walk, and people come from all over to join in. And that idea of people coming from all over is sort of what Can We Talk is about too, because it's saying that we can all do this together again. So that's very good. I don't know the change thing in that. I don't know what will change the world. I don't know. I think you have to do something. And I think you have to have hope.
What's as you said, it's like the Roxbury in Dorchester, that whole section. It's like the whole world.
Absolutely.
You see those beautiful black ladies with all those clothes on that look gorgeous and hanging off of triple deckers. Like in my mind's eye, I see these grandfathers and grandmothers and their children literally waving and happy that they're there.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Doctor?
We believe that some of the benefit of the program is because those who have had trauma find a way to articulate it, and someone is listening to them and appreciates that they are telling it. I've had more than one person, particularly with substance abuse, who will tell their story, and all of them have a story, and then say, I just didn't think anyone was interested.
I think you're right. You all know Washington Hill is my hero here in the Sarasota area. Thank you very much for all the work that you do. That is exactly what happens. In telling your story, someone else can be hearing it, and that's what happened to me, and not feel so alone.
Yes.
So that's that, yes.
Or stigmatized,
Or stigmatized.
whatever word you want to say. They know, obviously, they know their story, and they want to be able to share that story so that someone will hear it, will take the time to listen to it, and as you said, they may not do anything, but at least I was able to tell my story to someone who was willing to listen.
Absolutely. That's very much the kind of the philosophy and the theology of this and sharing. And we find out all that we have in common, even though my son was not murdered, but still I have the pain from this, that kind of thing. We had a man who came to our Can We Talk once we started. His son had been killed 22 years earlier in one of the first college mass shootings, Bard College in Vermont. And he came to our program, he admitted later, because he wanted to get us involved in his gun control fight that he had taken up. He didn't know what we were about. And he said he sat there and listened to the stories, and he was going to bring his petition out at the end of the night and ask people to join him. But as he listened to the stories, he started crying because he realized how disconnected he had been from his own pain. And he said, and I needed to cry because I needed to remember what this was all about anyway. So it's amazing what stories do to help us. We love stories. We are stories. That's how we make our way through the world. So,
Any more questions?
This poor lady, I know your hand was up earlier.
You mentioning this, that you have some mental health professionals there.
Yeah.
But nobody is allowed to give advice. So how do those people, can they choose to connect?
Absolutely. If you are in our program, we don't give advice to each other. The mental health professional, the clinical counselor would speak to them afterwards. And we say at the beginning, if you're having extra trouble or you need to talk with someone, and we ask the people to raise their hands so that afterwards you can talk to those people.
Privately.
And they, privately, and they make referrals sometimes privately.
The same people come to meetings over and over again.
It's in Boston, it's transient. It's like we have lots of new people. Some come one time, don't come back, but we have a core community. And here in Sarasota, the church people are just beginning to come, so it's just slowly opening up a little bit. Every community has kind of a different approach to it. There was some.
I think, did anyone down there have a question?
Those- Please.
Yes.
I will, yes. Okay. I went to Park Street Church, it's called Emmy-winning, and that is how, I just want to say that is how I got interested in South. And then later, I remember at the end of the talk, you told us this whole with you and Reverend
Gloria.
Gloria, and you had gone, and I was just so amazed. And then you said something else going on there, and that's when the came to our attention. But I knew about these from Asians, not really from actual international news. Anyway, so down here, I wrote a letter to the editor about Darfur from when Gloria
Wow.
was
Wow.
chairperson. The next thing I know, a very shining light was burning early called me and told me it's and I worked at the genocide. Ran for at least 10 years. We had students from
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you. What we learned, I'm sorry, please.
oh, was that me? Cut you off.
Oh, I thought, no. Go ahead.
Liz, I'm one of those Bostonians who watched you every night. But I really met you when you were taking that community activism that you have broader into the political world. And you keep alluding to it, that we're all, traumatized now. And Ayanna Pressley was running in 2018, and you brought a group of us together in your house and we strategized about how to go forward with it. And I'm wondering, when we have leaders like Ayanna on the political side, and we have leaders like you on the ministerial side, what do you see that we're going to be able to do in this trauma that we're in terms of the action everybody's creating? And what do you have a sense from what you've done on the individual basis, what we can do in the political?
AK Blanche, where are you? You want to answer that question? I don't have any big ideas, but there's lots of people who are very active in Sarasota. AK Blanche is here as a good friend, and she works with Sarasota Strong, which is the, trauma. How would you define Sarasota Strong?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit that is trying to build a stronger, healthier community by helping people identify trauma when they see it and know how to respond. So work that's absolutely in alignment with what Liz is doing. And we have, in the last month or so, been invited by The Gathering, which is a group of progressive faith leaders who are concerned about the larger political environment, to work with them to figure out how to bring together the activism and the trauma healing parts, because you really have to have both. To be an effective activist. You've got to process your own pain and know how to use it, know when to use it and how to use it. And to heal, being active, being an activist helps you healing. So we are in the process of doing that. We did a workshop, Liz, you were involved with that, was it a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago we did
About
that.
60 people
Yeah.
who came together, and Michelle was there.
Yeah.
So that's in process. We're debriefing that. We're trying to figure out how to take it to other places. But I think that really a big piece of this, to be effective, is we have to bring those two things together.
And I think you're doing an effective job. So I think that's going on. But you know what I think? I think it gets simple. I think you have to plant hope where you stand. So my ministry now is to speak to everyone I see. Hello, how you doing?
She's right.
And sometimes people don't want to speak. Have you try this? It's, especially in Sarasota, walking across the bridge. Hi, how you doing? I'm sure they want to call 911. Something's wrong with that woman. Yeah. Michelle and I went riding out in Lakewood Ranch, and we spoke to everybody.
She spoke to everybody. I caught on.
And it was sort of like a weapon almost. I felt bad. But I guess you have to figure out how to move through your own personal fear. And that's what you were saying, Andy. So you got to figure your own stuff first and then join the force with the movement kind of thing. So I think it's those kind of things. I think it's a very personal thing.
I think we might be all set. Didn't we just love her?
Did you do all right? Very good. Thank you.
And I think now we're going to do the book signing, and I don't know what Lynn is. I think
She said to do it up here. Is that what you mean, where to do it? Yeah.
Where are the books?
Thank you all for being here.
Very good.
Thank you.
Where do you want to
Thank you.
Not to be shy, I'm gonna get right
No,
to the line.
absolutely. You should.
I grow watching you every night.
Nice to see
Oh,
you.
gosh.
On my way to another event at
Okay, well, then I'm going to say, you know what I do?
Fabulous.
I hope I can do this right here. There's a page you're supposed to do it at.
Probably mark it.
Right there.
Thank you, yeah.
I heard your background. and I wanted to
Thanks. Thanks for being
I
here.
had no idea you
Get around.
Of course. Yeah, that's even better.
You and I were together.
I don't care what you say, you haven't changed.
No, except for my memory's getting shot.
Transcript with my husband, Stuart Mushman.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Shannon, how'd it go? You get it?
Did you do it at the